You're listening to Building the Broncos with Nick Kendell and Carl Dumler, Broncos Country's leading draft and scouting analysts. Head on over to milehighhuddle.com to sound off on all things Broncos.
We're Broncos Country, and it is once again time for another episode of Building the Broncos. I am your host, Carl Dumler, and with me as always, I have my co-host and good friend, Mr. Nick Kendell. Nick, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, doing pretty well. I cannot complain too much. I am hopeful that what we are doing this time, recording the podcast, is going to create better sound quality. It was a little bit sketchy there. We've had a little bit of ups and downs in that regard, but I'm hoping this can possibly be our highest quality podcast yet, both in content and sound quality. So we'll see, but doing pretty well. How about you, Carl?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm just, we've had like 6 inches of rain in the last 2 days.
Oh my gosh.
So it's like 100% humidity here, which is not normal for us.
It's bad here, yeah.
But no, it's been good. My wife and kid have been gone for a while, so it's good to have them home. And I mean, it's just been fun seeing what's all going on with the Broncos, of course. And I mean, I'm excited to talk some things today because we're kind of getting back to some of our roots here.
It's really exciting.
So
I do want to say one thing first. Before you mentioned the rain, we've talked about, I've been trying to lose a little bit of weight for the wedding, yada yada. Yesterday I went out for a 4-mile, walk and jog, just kind of finish my steps in. Natalie was doing some work, so I'm like, you know what, I'm going to take advantage of it. 2 miles in, I'm like, man, it looks like it might start raining. Oh my God, Carl. The heavens opened up and I just absolutely got soaked. My pockets were full of water. I was running in puddles, and I felt like I was in a flash flood. It was incredible, and I was just unbelievable. I opened the door, and Natalie just looks at me and just starts laughing because I am just dripping wet. So anyway, I know we want to get to the content here, but you mentioned the rain, and the rain and I are not on talking terms right now. I'm a little bit upset with the rain.
You must have got the storms that we had come through, so they were a lot of fun.
Ugh. We need them, though. It's been dry, so whatever.
But getting back to football, because we got a lot to talk about here today. I want to make sure everybody knows you can find me on Twitter at Carl Dumler MHH, and of course Nick at Nick Kendell MHH. And you can follow the podcast Twitter account at BTB Football Pod. And make sure you subscribe to our show and leave us a rating, as we value your input. You can find the show on iTunes, Stitcher, and even that of YouTube. Also, make sure you head on over to milehighhuddle.com, a new affiliate of the Maven Coalition and Sports Illustrated. This podcast is powered by Overtime Media.
Fantasy football fans, listen up. Do you want to join the biggest NFL season-long tournament ever? Of course you do. If you love fantasy football, and we know you do, then you need to enter the $3.5 million Best Ball Championship on Draft. That's right, $3.5 million in real money. It's freaking huge. With the wedding coming up, let me tell you, I could really use that type of money, and obviously if you're listening to this, you're probably a fantasy football fanatic like I am. It's a season long, but with no management. Just set it up and forget it. Once you're done drafting, that's it. No trades, no waiver wire. You don't even have to set up your lineup. Your best players get played automatically started, and you'll get the best score every week, guaranteed. There's no salary caps. You play in a real live snake draft, just like you play with your friends in a season-long league. For a limited time only, you can get a free entry into the Best Ball Championship when you make your first deposit, but you have to use the promo code HUDDLE. That's right, a free shot at $1 million just by using the promo code HUDDLE when you make your first deposit on Draft. Just search Draft in the App Store or go to draft.com and come play for free with promo code HUDDLE. Again, if you love fantasy football and you like money, you got to check it out.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All right, Carl. Well, today we're kind of going to do a little bit of a state of the roster after the 2 games. And, we obviously have the Scout's Eye preview that we like to do a lot of times. But with the Broncos not playing until Monday, we figured we could save that to the Sunday podcast. And like you said, kind of get back a little bit to our roots here, talking just the roster. And unfortunately, this kind of came about. The idea for this podcast is because, man, the Broncos are dropping like flies at this point. It's not great. It's not what you want to see. And, luckily it's not a lot of starters. That's a very good thing. But, it's not great. I do think that some people may be overreacting potentially to the training staff or anybody going on there, These things do tend to happen, and they can happen in clusters. Sometimes it's just straight up bad luck, or if you're drafting players with some injury history, Jake Butt, This stuff can't happen. But I think at this point, with all the injuries that have happened, we better, take a look at it and kind of get an idea of where the team is at and replacements, how long this is going to take, and potentially, some roster maneuvering. I mean, you get the IR, 2 guys designated to return. There's a lot of stuff that can go down. So, Carl, this is a section you worked on more than I did, and I'd like you to kick it off with some of these guys. The first one, your doppelganger.
Yeah. Well, before I get to that, I just kind of want to point out a few of these injuries. My guess is if the Broncos were in the regular season and had a game today, some of these guys would be playing. And so kind of keep that in mind, that preseason, training camp, all that kind of stuff. Teams are a lot more cautious, especially with players that are known. And so if they're missing some time just because they just want to make sure they're 100%, I mean, that's always the goal. 100% for the season, not for preseason. And so I just keep that in mind. And then I wanted to start off asking you just a quick question, because this was something that I was thinking about with Vic Fangio. We keep talking about how we view him as a coach and things like that. And one thing that's kind of stood out to me, I mean, they've been practicing for 2.5 weeks now?
I think they've had like 16 or 17 practices at this point.
Right. So 2.5 weeks of practices. And you're not seeing a lot of guys get those veteran days. I mean, you've had some of those coaching staffs in the past that like half the veterans seem to get time off. And Vic Fangio seems to be, no, everybody's out here. If they can practice, they're practicing. Are you good with that? Or are you seeing some of these injuries and kind of wondering maybe he's wearing some of these veterans out? And maybe, I'm always thinking of like Josh McDaniels, where they started out 6-0, but players talked about where they were worn out because they worked so hard. They were pushed so hard during preseason that by the time they got midseason, they had nothing left. Are you worried about any of that?
I definitely am a little bit worried about that. Not so much right now, but the season, when it gets a little bit longer, I'm just curious to see how these guys are going to keep it up. That being said, the big injuries that we've seen so far, I don't think are correlated with that. And again, being a data guy myself, an epidemiologist, this is one off season of practices, so I'm not going to take any, grand sweeping claims or thoughts away from the injuries that have happened.
Right.
There's just not enough data. If we have multiple seasons of the Broncos, practicing like this and they're being injured at a higher rate than other teams, then, you have enough data that you can kind of get something there. But it's too early to say that. We don't know. Everything is just a projection in that regard. So, definitely something to think about and something to wonder about, but I'm not thinking too hard about it. It is what it is, and hopefully they can stay lucky. I think there's been a few studies as well that the main factor when it comes to injuries, luck. So, gotta have that on your side. Like the Broncos 2013, they very well may have kept up with the Seahawks and beat the Seahawks in that Super Bowl. But what were they out? 5 starters in the defense? And Ryan Clady was out too, I think?
I think it was like 6 or 7, actually.
And 2 of them being Chris Harris Jr. and Von Miller.
Right. 2 of your best players, if not the best players on your defense.
In the last decade.
Right.
Like your 2 best players in the last decade, I would say.
Right.
Peyton Manning, too. Those are the guys. But so it's like, yeah, the injuries are huge, and that's luck. But the injuries are hitting the Broncos pretty hard, pretty early. They haven't lost anybody, irreplaceable, knock on wood. But start it off again. Yeah, your doppelganger.
Right, yes. So we're going to start with Andy Janovich. You're right. I love that he and I have the same beard and some of the same hobbies, I guess, going out hunting, all those kind of things. But anyway, they were worried for a while there that he had a torn pectoral muscle. Thankfully, it came back that it was only strained. But it also means that he's out 6 to 8 weeks. So that would mean possibly returning around like week 3 to week 5. And on the roster right now, so there's 2 replacements that could be options for the Broncos, depending on how they want to do their roster building. And that's kind of the question with some of these injuries, how they're going to form their roster. But of course, they have George Aston. And the other option that they were trying out today at practice was Troy Fumagalli. And I'd brought that up with somebody and they said, oh, no, that's not how this works. He's a tight end. And I mean, I've seen him in the past play some fullback for the Broncos. They put him there. He's kind of that H-back hybrid kind of player that they can use. And so, I mean, if they really don't believe in George Aston really being a halfway decent starter for them, or at least a player that can come in and do some plays for him, I mean, you got to think the fullback positions, it's not a well thought of position in the NFL these days.
It's a dying position.
It is.
I mean, unless you have a freak like Kyle Juszczyk, then, that's a position a lot of teams are instead going with a different player. That being said, I do got to call it out for Janovich. Even if the offensive stuff I think is a little bit overhyped at times, his special teams prowess is the thing that I'm actually concerned about the most, losing him potentially for 6 to 8 weeks, but maybe the whole season. That's the biggest thing for me.
Right. And see, that's the other big thing with his injury is he at least brought that side of things. We don't know with George Aston if he can be a special teams kind of player for the Broncos. And so is his roster spot worth keeping when they absolutely need a fullback, put in Troy Fumagalli, or even put in an extra offensive lineman if it's a short yardage kind of situation? I mean, there's options that they can do. So I'm not sure that his roster spot is actually as secure as some people out there are making it out to be, where I think the Broncos could possibly, even if they think Janovich is going to be back earlier in that, only 6 weeks, they might not IR him. Might try to stash him where, I mean, since you can only have 46 on the active roster for game days, maybe try to just hold off as long as they possibly can. I'm not sure. I mean, it's just going to be interesting to see what they're going to do with a couple of these guys, because they got a lot of these injuries that are that 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah. I think the biggest factor, honestly, will be how good Fumagalli / George Aston look in filling in for him. I mean, there's a possibility that Janovich, with his injury and everything, doesn't make the team, right? That's a possibility. Yeah. Considering the numbers game that they have going on here. So, and George Aston, I mean, he was one of the better fullbacks in college last year, and he's made some plays. I mean, I haven't seen him, deliver drilling blocks like Janovich has in the run game, like that ISO block with Dalton and Janovich. I mean, that was beautiful for Royce Freeman. But, I mean, it's a numbers game, and Janovich is playing fullback, which, I mean, I talk about running backs being devalued in today's game, but gosh, a fullback? So, and I know that's an important part of Rick Scangarello's offense, but still, Rich Scangarello. So, yeah, I don't know. That's one that I'm very interested in, and big thing for me, again, special teams. But the guy that I'm probably most saddened about with the injuries has got to be Theo Riddick. I mean, you talk about a guy that there was some hype. They spent a good amount of money to get him, and he comes in his first action, I mean, probably 3 snaps in, and Kevin Hogan delivers a hospital ball, which, to be fair to to Hogan, Drew Lock also threw some balls that were a little bit putting his guys in a little bit of harm's way. But Theo Riddick out there, Kevin Hogan throws a lame duck, and wham, Theo Riddick injured, fractured shoulder, 6 to 8 weeks. So it looks like Devontae Booker is going to be making this team, which I was hoping for a little bit extra draft capital because, me, I'm a psycho in that regard. But I think that it's a real disappointment, because getting that guy that can be that kind of weapon in the pass game for the Broncos out of the backfield is something that's just, I mean, we've been harping on it all offseason. It's non-negotiable. You got to have that in today's NFL.
Well, it was easy to see just in his few snaps in that game how valuable he could be. I mean, his ability to even come out of the backfield, go out to the outside wide receiver spot, be able to make those quick slant plays. I mean, that was some great route running that I watched there. His one play on that 3rd down where he was wide open and Hogan missed him. I mean, that would have been a big play because the defender was behind him. There was no way the defender's going to catch him. The middle of the field looked wide open. It was a perfect play call, and just quarterback missed it. And unfortunately, Riddick, the injury now, this is another one of those. I guess I would say, I mean, the question has to keep coming up. Do you IR him and return him halfway through the season? Or is this one of those you're kind of going, this guy is such a playmaker, we need him as soon as he can get onto the field?
And then you only have so many guys. I mean, the Broncos still have, knock on wood, but the Broncos still have 3 preseason games left. So, the guys that are listed here, this is going to be added to, probably.
Right.
Hopefully it's just low-level guys. I'm not wishing that on anybody, but, hopefully it's just low-level guys. But, man, it's it's concerning. And I mean, the Broncos are paying him $2.5 million, and if they get rid of him, that's $1 million dead cap. So, man, I don't know. I guess he's one that probably I am IRing, hoping to designate to return, just because I don't know if I can justify carrying 4 running backs and a fullback, that kind of thing. But it's a tough decision. Honestly, the NFL needs to expand these damn rosters. I think that's going to be coming up in the next collective bargaining agreement. But
right.
Yeah, that one sucks. I was really hoping to see more Theo Riddick, and just excited to see how he could be used in the pass game and what Scangarello had planned for him, because he was a guy they were excited to get, and just like that, boof. Luckily, it's only 6 to 8 weeks, but still, it's too bad. Speaking of a longer term, Drew, go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking, this is where the argument for me of why you don't keep George Aston on the roster. That you store Theo Riddick and you say, Fumagalli, hang in there for us, and then whenever maybe Andy Janovich can be one of those guys that you designate to return halfway through the season and let him get fully healed up and just kind of try to hang on as long as you possibly can. I don't know. I mean, because Riddick brings so much to the offense, he's such a playmaker that they don't have. I know everybody wants Phillip Lindsay to be that next big receiving option for the Broncos, especially at the running back position, but he just is not the receiving option that Theo Riddick is. Now, yes, his playmaking ability is 10 times that of Riddick, but Riddick as a receiver is huge. And it's such a big part of what the Broncos want to have in their offense. So to me, I guess if I'm making a decision, I'm saying, Fumagalli, you're going to play fullback when we need you to. Riddick, we're going to keep you on the roster, and we're going to hope that you can return by week 2, 3 of the season. And so you only miss a couple games.
That makes sense, and hopefully the thing that scares me a little bit about that with Fumagalli being moved to fullback is that you're already playing a numbers game at the tight end position. So you're definitely putting him out there, and if he gets injured, which miss the whole rookie season, then what? I don't know. It's definitely a little bit of a gamble there. But again, he could get injured playing tight end too. But I just feel like fullback's a little bit more of a physical position. I mean, with how those guys have to go in there and create those holes. Right.
Well, you're getting up to full speed in that 3 or 4 yards compared to tight end where you're hitting a guy within that first yard usually.
Yeah.
And so there's a big difference between the two types of collisions that you're going through. And you're right. The tight end position, I mean, it's one that has been going through some injuries. I mean, we can talk about 2 guys here. Austin Fort, losing him for the season, torn ACL. That one was tough. It was. I mean, because he was having a good camp. He was a guy that was getting a lot of attention from the coaching staff, and boom, out. Just freak injury. One of those non-contact injuries that you hate to watch. When a guy just goes down to the ground. I'm impressed that he held on to the football.
Yeah.
I mean, that's toughness right there. But thankfully, on the other end of that, then you got some other tight ends that are coming back from injury, like Jake Butt finally is back at practice. Actually did some 11-on-11 work. Yep. Bug Howard's another one. So at least you have some of those guys are starting to make a little bit of a comeback. But can you really trust Jake Butt?
Oh, man. I probably not. I like him, and he says everything right. I mean, he's a dude that you'd love to be friends with, right? Or marry your daughter to.
Oh, easily, yeah.
Injured, so many injuries. It's just probably one of the guys you can depend on the least on the roster right now. But what can you do? Too bad for Austin Fort. That being said, he gets some guaranteed money and gets to work with the Broncos trainers and stuff, and he'll be right back here next year. So he'll get another chance. So maybe it'll be a blessing in disguise if Broncos can protect him when otherwise he might have been on the practice squad. But still, you never want to see those injuries, especially in ACL. He needs to do whatever. Never mind. I was going to say, I always get an ACL and Achilles mixed up. Sanders had the Achilles. So that's crazy, man. I can't believe he's going to be back week 1. How the heck can a guy like that with that injury and that age come back and, he had that injury in end of October, November or something? And you have Jake Butt, who's been hobbled for like 3 years now.
Right.
It's crazy.
Everybody's body's different.
Yeah.
Everybody heals a little bit differently. And obviously Sanders, because he had another surgery on top of the Achilles on his other foot. And so again, it's just amazing what he's been able to do to get back on the field. It sounded like he had an incredible practice today.
Yeah. He's by far the most dynamic pass weapon they have. And without him, the offense is going to get congested. And with him, can really open up the explosive vertical pass games, which synergy in the offense opens up the run game as well. So,
right.
Gosh darn, Sanders, stay healthy and contribute.
Exactly. But, and like I said, I mean, Jake Butt, we'll just have to kind of see. I do think, I mean, very good chance he makes the roster now.
He should, yeah. Unless he gets hurt.
Well, I mean, Vic Fangio was asked today, does he have to play in the preseason to make this roster? And he said, no, not really.
Huh.
He said we'd like him to, but it didn't sound like that is completely the whole picture. I mean, and it shouldn't be. I mean, you got to read what he does in practice, and you don't want to stick him in games if he's not quite ready, but it's still kind of hard when the guy hasn't pretty much played in 3 years to sit there and say that his roster spot is secure even if he doesn't play in a game. But I mean, it just kind of I guess because of Austin Fort going down, there's nobody else to take his spot.
Yeah. You are correct there.
I do think that they want to run a lot of 2 tight end sets this year. And if that's the case, I really do think you need to carry 4 tight ends on your roster.
Yeah. I do not disagree. Now we probably should get to the rash of injuries to the linebacker position. Probably the top 3 linebackers for the Broncos. Todd Davis with a calf tear, out 3 to 4 weeks, although he's already 2 gone by, so he should be ready week 1. Josie Jewell, oblique injury. He's day-to-day. He's back at practice, but that's something to watch. And Joseph Jones, triceps injury, 6 to 8 weeks, which is probably I felt that one in my heart, Carl, when I found that one out, because I know he was a guy you were very excited about this year.
I was. I mean, I made the prediction on this podcast that he would take a starting job from somebody this year. And it sounded like he was having a great camp, looking very, very good. The little snaps that he did actually do in the Hall of Fame game looked pretty good in those. And so then to see that he went down, I mean, at least it's not season ending. And I do think he's one of those guys, for me at least, I'm looking at him as a designated return kind of guy. Because, well, I think it's going to be easier to store him because let's say you have to carry him on your opening day 53-man roster if you want somebody to be designated to return. Well, I don't think anybody's picking up our backup linebackers. So it's going to be easier to say, at the end of you cut those other linebackers, I think you can bring one of them back or bring somebody from another roster, whatever, on cut down day. I mean, there's going to be plenty of other options. I just think he's going to be one of those guys you're going to want to keep around.
Yeah, I agree with you there, especially, again, special teams prowess. He's probably the best special teamer on this team last year. So we'll see. Hopefully they can get back, and hopefully Davis and Jewell can be back as well and see some preseason reps, at least from Jewell, just because outside of Alexander Johnson, who has been doing pretty well, Pro Football Focus had him as the highest rated linebacker or the highest rated Bronco in the last game, which I think he played pretty well. There was a couple of plays where he looked like he got out of whack, and also there's some times where he just doesn't have the juice to close on guys. Right? It's just like you're like biting your lip, like, oh God, just get there. Because if you get there, I mean, he's like chasing and he's got the right read, just like can't get there.
Right.
But I feel the same thing with Todd Davis too. Like it's like, you did pretty much everything right. You just got to close on him. And maybe just doesn't have that God-given ability to do that. So Alexander Johnson has been playing pretty well. I've actually been decently surprised with him. And, if you're not asking him to play in space and coverage and whatnot, then you're going to be fine. But again, that's true for many kind of those strong inside linebackers. So yeah, the other big injury, I guess, is Billy Wynn to talk about. A torn tricep, done for the year. He probably wasn't making this team, and they probably really could have used him in that Seattle game, honestly, because the backup defensive line did not look great. But you feel for him because he tore I think it was a tricep injury as well in that week 1 game against the preseason week 1 game against the Bears, I believe it was, 2 years ago, out for the season, like very first defensive play of the game or something. And then he does the same freaking thing. And I remember reading a story about him and how his girlfriend's like a personal, or his girlfriend or fiance maybe is a sports rehab person, a trainer, and she helped him a lot, and he had a lot of difficult times going through the last couple seasons to get to this point, and he was excited to make the most of it. Wham. Gone. Done for the season. Maybe done for his career. He's an older guy, so who knows? So, the NFL, it's not for long, so you never know.
I guess in some ways, the injury's not good, but is it a little bit of a blessing in disguise in the fact, like you said, pretty good chance he probably wasn't making this roster, where they at least now have to do an injury settlement with him. So he at least gets a little bit of money for his effort. But that's just kind of the silver lining in a bad situation.
Yeah. the stability there and the cash cannot hurt, right? I would definitely be okay with that. But after having gone through that and reading the story that I read, it sounded like it was pretty rough time for him in that regard, and this is going to make matters worse probably. So
right.
Feel for him, thoughts out for him. But, other than that, a couple hamstrings. I think Kareem Jackson was nursing a hammy, which is a concern. You never know. I mean, could have just been precautionary. And Hamilton's also had a hamstring issue that he's back from now, but definitely those hamstrings can creep back up. You got to be careful with those guys. And nagging hamstring is probably one of the worst things you could have. I mean, ACL, obviously, whatever, but those things can really draw out. Oh, it should be a week. And then 2 months later, they're back in action. So
right.
You got to watch out for those hamstrings.
Right. I remember I pulled a hamstring in college playing football. Okay. And I went to a physical therapist. And pretty much they told me, they said, you got to stay off this for quite a while because it was really badly pulled. And like a week later, I remember I was like, oh man, it feels pretty good. And then I started jogging and I was like, okay, that's not too bad. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to try one sprint and heard a pop. Oh. And I was just like, and I was right back to starting. And she said, all right, your recovery is even worse.
Ugh.
So, I mean, it took me probably 9 months to fully get back to trusting that I could take off and run and not worry about it popping. So, I understand those, but it does sound like Vic Fangio today did say Kareem Jackson probably will be back for the joint practices. And Hamilton, like you said, is already playing. So, at least those, they seem minor. But like you said, minor can turn major pretty quick.
Yep, you got to be careful with those hammies. They can nag. All right, well, we should probably take a break here talking about the injuries. That's enough bad juju on the podcast. Those are the only injuries we're going to have, folks. That's it. No more allowed. I'm going to will it into existence. You guys too.
Crisscross applesauce.
Yeah, crisscross applesauce indeed. But we will be right back.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Alrighty, and we are back on the Building the Broncos podcast, kind of doing a state of the roster with things going on, injury. We're 2 games in, 16, 17 practices in. So we're starting to get an idea about this team, the roster specifically. We're not sure exactly how they're going to stack up against NFL competition, opponents that is, but we kind of get an idea of how they're stacking up with each other and the guys already on the roster, and the depth of the Falcons and the Seahawks as well. And we got to do one of my favorite segments that we do every week, Carl. It's time to bring it back, and it's something that typically we do with the Scout Site preview, but today we're going to bring it here since this is a State of the Roster podcast, and we're going to do stock up, stock down. And being that some people think I can be a little bit of a grumpy gills, an Eeyore of sorts of the podcast, does that make you Pooh or Piglet? Are you Rabbit or Tigger?
Oh, I gotta be Tigger.
Owl.
I gotta be Tigger, right?
You're Tigger?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
No, that's my kid actually bouncing off the walls.
You don't have like the incredible blah, 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 crazy energy.
I'm probably winning the Pooh. I mean, I'm a big honey fan. I got the big belly, so I'll take it.
I don't know about that. Man, I've been logging my calories in MyFitnessPal and just getting there, and I'm hitting it, man. It's got to happen. 3 months, you just got to go for it. So anyway, back to stock up, stock down. We probably should get to football.
That's true. Sorry. I'll ask you later about if you're going to go shirtless at your wedding.
Oh, man. October in the mountains. The nips are going to be hard. Look out. Everybody's got to wear eye protection. Anyway, back to the football side of things. Stock report, we're going to do 3 stocks up and 2 stocks down. And the first guy I want to touch on here, a guy that we already talked about a little bit, but I wrote down my first stock up and stock down. Let Carl do the rest, and I filled out mine so that way I don't steal everybody from Carl. But a guy I want to talk about a little bit here, again, it's Alexander Johnson. He's not the prototypical linebacker in today's game. He's a little bit, honestly, tall and big, and with that comes some lack of flexibility, change of direction, and straight line speed. But I think he's been playing pretty darn well, all things considered, especially because he's kind of like being called up from AAA to the major leagues, right? He's been moved up a couple slots due to all the injuries to the linebacker position, and he's held his own for the most part. I do think that the game is still a little bit fast for him, a guy that's been out of the league for multiple years, but he's playing with intensity. It looks like it's slowing down. I haven't seen many poor reads besides there was a screen where I thought he was a little bit out of position and didn't have the makeup speed to catch up with the guy. But overall, I think he's looking pretty good, especially as more of a true box linebacker in that 3-4 scheme. He's going to be in there in base if Todd Davis gets hurt. He's the Todd Davis backup. But really, I've been impressed. And honestly, if he can continue to improve this season, he might make a guy that I'm a fan of in Todd Davis potentially a cap casualty next offseason, just because, they're going to be creating, they might want to create some cap room. And if Alexander Johnson, younger, cheaper option is in there that can do it. Is he younger though? They're probably about the same age because Alexander Johnson was out for a while. Anyway, cheaper option for the Broncos. They might end up looking that way. So I've been decently impressed with him. What about you? Have you thought he stood out a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a few plays where I thought he actually didn't seem overwhelmed like some of the other guys. I mean,
he's the only one. The other linebackers have disappointed, but Justin Hollins here and there. But everybody else, Justin Hollins and Alexander Johnson are the only ones I'd even be happy to roster.
Right.
Given the other guys.
And it's amazing because you said it that they're not your typical off-ball linebacker because Justin Hollins is 6'5", Alexander Johnson's 6'2". So, I mean, we got the biggest basketball inside linebackers in football right now. But no, I mean, this last game especially, it was so angering to watch the other linebackers bite on every play action, every one of them. And I mean, that was all that the Seahawks did was play action, have linebacker or wide receiver over the middle. Paxton Lynch hits that for an easy play. Nobody within 5 yards of the receiver. It was just easy. And I'm not trying to take away from Paxton Lynch's day or anything like that. I mean, he did what he was supposed to do. But the linebackers were just terrible, other than Alexander Johnson. And Justin Hollins had a few plays. He still looks a little bit lost at times. He gets turned around. And so, I mean, he still has a ways to go. But otherwise, yeah, those are the two guys that definitely stuck out. And Alexander Johnson, I mean, I don't want him starting, but if he has to, I mean, I guess I'm okay with it. I mean, it's not anything that's going to have me excited by any means. It's definitely the linebacker position. Once Joseph Jones went down, the depth just took a nosedive. So
depth hurts worse when your starters go out.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, that was something that I was talking about with a lot of the talk this week after, what's his name? Devin Bush had his big week and everybody's talking about how great he looked on the field. And so some Bronco fans are going, oh, we should have drafted him. Well, I don't think we're saying that if Josie Jewell and Todd Davis are fully healthy and Joseph Jones is healthy and we're sitting there talking about this linebacker group looking okay. I mean, not great by any means, but I think that's just kind of some of the panic when you're looking at, oh my gosh, look at all these backups and how terrible they are. We really could have used Devin Bush, which yes, we could have. But we could also use a Noah Fant and a Drew Lock.
Yeah.
So,
and for me, it's something that's team building. Again, bringing it back to this, you have a chance to have. Let's say you can have. There's 3 units on the defense, right? Defensive line, linebackers, and I'm including edge rushers as defensive line because you should. They're pass rushers, and secondary. If you could have 2 of them be good to great and 1 average, who would you have be the average unit?
Linebackers.
It's the linebackers. They're
right.
The easiest to cover up. They're the guys who are taking off in these sub packages. So Davis and Jewell can provide average play. Are either of them true difference makers? No, but still, that's you can be fine there. You can have a great defense with solid linebackers as long as they do their job. They're not playing undisciplined. So especially in his own defense.
Right.
So yeah, I'm not as worried. Moving along though, you have your guy here, Dalton Reisner. Stock up.
Yeah, I mean, just stories that I'm hearing from training camp where other players, veterans, are coming up to him and asking for advice. They're looking to this rookie of all players. And it sounds like, I mean, he's a coach favorite, works hard. When I was at practice, I mean, the guy is just so strong. There was a pass play on the first game, the Hall of Fame game, where like the others kind of got pushed back a little bit and you see Dalton Reisner still at the line of scrimmage just anchored in against his guy. Now, yes, it was second string defensive line for the Falcons kind of thing. But when I was at training camp, he was doing the exact same thing every single play. You look in the run game, you talked about Royce Freeman's 50-yard run. Dalton Reisner was right there. They were running it right behind him. And so it's just fun to watch this kid. I think he's one of those guys, barring injury, this is a guy you keep on this offensive line because he's a leader. I think he could easily develop into the captain of the offensive line. And I think he's helping everybody around him. I mean, we talk about Bowles and what he could bring this year. I think Dalton Reisner being next to him is such a huge advantage. And so, I mean, it's just stock way up for this guy. Such a great pick. I think he's just going to be a fan favorite for a long time.
Yeah, I am very pleased with Reisner, and I don't know if he'll ever be great as far as like a top 5 guard in the league, right? Like that's pretty lofty goals. You got, Quentin Nelson, Ali Marpeta's on the rise, Brandon Brooks, Brandon Scherf, Zach Martin. There's a lot of good guards, but I think he's going to be a really good player at guard for 10 plus years. And, you'll take those guys when you can get them on the offensive line, considering how many injuries there are not injuries, but how desperate teams are for those quality offensive linemen. So left guard, maybe right guard and center at some point. We'll see. But you have check one offensive lineman down for the Broncos for the next 4 seasons because he's going to be here.
Right. One I loved earlier today, you said probably the person that least concerns you on the offensive line is the rookie. And it's just because he's shown so much in such a little time with the Broncos. Now, yes, the others, some of it's because of injuries, some of it's because of inconsistent play. But Reisner, I just really do think that this is a guy that is going to be around for the Broncos for a long time. Very good second round pick for them. What they needed a guy that could step in day one on that offensive line and be a true quality starter for them. And I definitely think they found that. But let's get to the negative Nancy side of things. And your first stock down.
For me, it's more of just a guy, and it's not so much the games, although he didn't stand out, but it's got to be Courtland Sutton, right? Wide receiver 1 that has not really taken over the reps in camp. He's been plagued with drops, and I know that there's the thing where they're asking him to do stuff that he's not comfortable with, but still, that still has me gritting my teeth. So we'll see. We'll know more after the next 2 preseason games. But if you're depending on Sutton to provide some ability in this pass game and to really help, beyond the season too. This might be Sanders' last year in Denver. He's just not living up to it for me. And I was definitely a little bit skeptical to pick at the time, but then I, kind of got around to it. Great quickness, guy who can go up and get the ball, physical, etc. Got to improve that route running so he's just not a deep threat because he doesn't have deep speed. He just uses that size and the aggressiveness that he goes up to get the ball there to do that. But so far in camps, a lot of drops, and Fangio hasn't shied away of criticizing him as well. So for me right now, considering I had hopes, he'd take that mantle and challenge Sanders for that wide receiver 1 this year from the X, the arrow down right now, stock down for Courtland Sutton.
Right. It's one of those. I remember Cody Latimer. A lot of people were excited about him. Training camp, there'd be stories of him making these great one-handed catches, just going up, making, just amazing catches. Courtland Sutton, you're hearing some of those same things, and you're just hoping more. You got it. I don't care about those. I know he can do those. I want to hear this guy was very, very consistent today. Route running was great. Hands were great on every single catch. He should not be dropping footballs that are routine catches. He has great hands, or should have great hands. A lot of that is just concentration. And I was there at the practice when he and Sanders fought. Now, the fight got out of hand, and Sanders probably shouldn't have challenged him as much as he did. But he was upset with Courtland Sutton because Sutton was not doing his job right. And for a guy, like you said, that's supposed to be fighting for your number 1 wide receiver, if you as a quarterback can't trust your number 1 wide receiver to actually run the route that he's supposed to run or catch the football when you absolutely need a catch, that's not a great sign for the Broncos. And so, yes, he's got a lot of growing up to do, I think. I do think he has some maturity issues, and I think it's just showing up a little bit on the field. I haven't given up on the kid. I really think he has all the talent in the world. He really does. He's more talented than Sanders, in my opinion. But it's a matter of who's done it on the field. Sanders, obviously. Sanders is consistent day in, day out, hard worker. We've seen him with the injury of just his work that he's put in to get back from this injury. So, I definitely, I'm in agreement with you. Stock down a little bit here on Courtland Sutton. But my guy, and this is one, sticking with the wide receiver position, made the change from cornerback to wide receiver, hoping that he could maybe do something. Brendan Langley. And we've been talking about it on here of the Broncos lacking that true speedster that can really challenge the defense down the field, make them have to respect the speed, and hoping maybe Brendan Langley could be that kind of guy for him. He hasn't. He's supposed to maybe be that special teams guy for him. He's dropped a bunch. He's dropped a punt. He's dropped a kick. The things that he needed to do, He's done none of them. And so right now, I can't see how there's any chance unless he does some amazing things over the next 3 games that Brendan Langley makes this roster.
And we will be back on the Huddle Up podcast to talk more stock up and stock down with the Denver Broncos. And we will be right back.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Alrighty, and we are back on the Building the Broncos podcast to continue talking stock up and stock down. And my guy, Royce Freeman. Man, I was super impressed with how he looked in the game. I mean, the fluidity that he showed, the speed, the vision, and I'm excited to see him in this zone blocking scheme. But the main thing that I'm excited to see with him is really just his usage with his hands. I mean, in camp, people I've spoken with, they're really excited about Royce Freeman in this offense because Lindsey, while he's the explosive guy, he haven't shown the hands yet. And Royce really has the propensity to use his hands. So I'm excited to see his involvement in the pass game now with Theo Riddick out.
Right. Well, he's going to be the red zone goal line kind of guy. He is. He's got some pretty good hands, actually. When I watched him at practice, I was very impressed with his ability to catch the football. He was a better receiving option than Lindsey by far. And you're right. I think he looks quicker than last year. I've been hearing that this offense is just that perfect fit for him. I mean, we've talked about it on here that when he was at Oregon, they ran that zone scheme, and here we are running the zone scheme. So I think this is perfect for him. He did perfect with that 50-yard run where it was you find the hole, you stick your foot in the ground, and you just get down the field. And I love when they were talking to him about the run afterwards, he was mad that he didn't finish for a touchdown. I mean, that's the kind of attitude you want to see out of that kind of guy that just wants more. And so, yeah, I'm loving what I'm seeing from him, loving what I'm hearing from him. And another guy that I'm just loving everything that I'm seeing from him, and it makes me feel much better about a position that we had a lot of question about, and that is Malik Reed. The Broncos lose Shane Ray, Shaq Barrett. Who's going to fill in for him? Everybody kind of thought it was going to be Holland. He's gone. He gone. You're better at that than I am. But no, Malik Reed, this guy, just pressure. Now, run game, I do think that's going to be an issue for him because he is on the smaller side of things for an outside linebacker. But, oh yeah, that's true. There's so many plays. I'm not even going to bring that up. But Malik Reed, this guy, sacking both games and pressured just all the time. I love his speed to get around the edge, but he also has a counter move to the inside. I mean, you can tell this guy has been watching Von Miller. Because he doesn't do it to the level that Von Miller does it, but he tries to mimic exactly what Von Miller does. And who better to mimic than Von Miller? Now, a lot of people don't have that speed. Malik Reed actually has speed. So I'm very excited to watch this kid. I'm glad that the Broncos found him. I think he's going to be a great backup for him this year.
Alrighty, and my second and last stock down has got to be Kevin Hogan, quarterback. I know he is like the winningest quarterback of all time at Stanford and one of the highest in terms of statistical output, but my gosh, it's obvious watching him versus Drew Lock that Drew Lock is the guy that needs to be getting the reps out there. He needs to be the dude with the second team. And I know when I was doing quarterback articles this offseason, and the Kevin Hogan truthers came out, but you guys, good luck to you and Kevin Hogan next, because hearing that he's going to be on the scout team, it sounds like that train is about over.
Well, and I think the Broncos are going to be forced to only keep 2 quarterbacks, just because of some of the roster numbers that they're going to be looking at. So, I mean, Kevin Hogan's kind of the loser in that. I hope he finds his way onto another NFL roster. I just don't see it here with the Broncos. And like you said, it just seems like Drew Lock has already passed him. They're really preparing for Drew Lock to be that backup now. So I wish him well, but that's the name of the game in the NFL. And so my second stock down, Chaz Green. I mean, did any Bronco have a worse game than Chaz Green this last week?
May I nominate Kevin Hogan?
Okay, maybe there, but I mean, it was terrible. I don't think I saw, but maybe 1 or 2 blocks that were actually halfway decent in that game from this guy. So there's no way he's making this roster. He about got Drew Lock killed in that game.
Yeah, you are not wrong there. He struggled a lot, and I think he also had a penalty. So if you're giving up pressures and you're giving your teams or pushing them back because of penalties, well, you're probably going to be looking for a new job, maybe not even football. And my final stock up, I thought of a few guys here, Isaac Yiadom, perhaps Garrett Bowles, but for me in the end, it came down to Sua Cravens, a guy that I had been told, had been more focused on his rap career than football. A lot of people were not happy with him and his attitude and his work ethic, and man, he's looking pretty good out there, flying around. He's dropped weight. He's playing only safety now. And, obviously he's the fourth safety right now. But, man, I got to say I'm impressed. And with the special teams looking so bad, I really think he's got a chance to make some hay there. So, Sua Cravens, a guy that I had all but buried. Not as much buried as DeMarcus Walker, but buried. And he is looking good out there. So, stock up for Sua Cravens. And I'm excited. Maybe the best is yet to come there. Maybe something's unlocked. There's no doubt he's talented. You just got to match the desire and determination with the talent, and looks like he's heading that direction.
And my final one, I'm going to go with Devontae Bosby. Now, I know there's a lot of people that point to the play this last week what's the receiver's name? Yeah, DK Metcalf. I can't believe I forgot that. Anyway, that he got a little bit caught out of position on that one play. But this is more of my looking at both preseason games, everything I'm hearing from training camp, and what I saw myself when I was there at training camp. And I just think this guy is such a good fit with this system. He is a guy that is a turnover machine, and it's easy to see that he can get himself in a position. He knows when to break on the ball. I just think he is so perfect for this. And from what I've seen in the games, he's made some plays for him. He's came down, made some nice tackles. He's not afraid to stick his nose in and get some tackles as well. So I think this guy, it really wouldn't surprise me by the mid part of the season if he's the third cornerback on this roster.
Wow, even over Isaac Yiadom, who has also been looking pretty good.
Well, yeah, and that's the other thing. Both of them are pushing each other, so it's nice that way. And I almost put Yiadom here, actually. And so, I like both of them. I like both their games. The reason I put Bosby instead of Yiadom is because we kind of knew what Yiadom was a little bit. He at least got some run last year. Bosby coming from the AAF Football League, and here he is coming in, wondering if he's even going to make the roster. Now it's not even a question if he's making the roster. It's just a matter, right? It's just a matter of how much playing time he's going to get on the field. And so I think that's going to be a great battle between those two. And it could make it where next year, I hate to say this, Chris Harris is just amazing. But if you got these young guys stepping up, it makes it feel a little bit easier to move on. It's always going to hurt. But it makes it at least a little bit easier to understand why the Broncos, at least roster building wise, could be okay with that kind of decision.
Alrighty, well, you heard the guy. Some stocks up, some stocks down on the Denver Broncos. Obviously, still 3 more preseason games to go, a few more practices to go, and hopefully no more injuries to go. But that's kind of the state we're in right now. The Broncos, 1-1, and there's injuries are starting to pile up, but the season is still young. Yeah, heck, the season hasn't even started yet. So we're going to find out a lot about this team going forward. There's a lot of promising players as well. Some players disappointing, but you know what? Can't be too high or too low at this point of the season. But that's going to wrap up this episode of Building the Broncos, powered by Overtime Media. You can find Carl on Twitter, at Carl Dumler MHH, and myself, at Kendell MHH. Make sure you head on over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of the Maven Coalition and Sports Illustrated. Also head on over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating and a comment, as your support can help us continue to bring you our Denver Bronco deep dives. You can follow the Building the Broncos podcast and all our other great audio content by subscribing to the Huddle Up podcast wherever you listen to your shows. You can follow us on Twitter, at Mile High Huddle, and at BTB Football Pod. For Carl, I'm Nick, wrapping up another episode of the Building the Broncos podcast. We hope you guys enjoyed it, and we will see you soon. Go Broncos.
You've been listening to Building the Broncos. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.